This ministry was inspired by God showing me that I am a preacher in 10 buildings each for 20,000 people each, in one city where I preach 10 different sermons in one day. This is great.
All right, let's talk about one of the most complex, most misunderstood, and honestly most fascinating topics in Mormonism: polygamy. It's a practice that was once foundational, then banned. But, as we're going to see, it never really went away.
So right off the bat, we're hit with this massive contradiction. How can something be officially outlawed by your church, but at the same time be a key part of your eternal, unchangeable doctrine? That's the puzzle we're going to piece together today.
And to do that, we have to start by looking at what I call the polygamy paradox. It's this deep, fundamental tension between what the church says to do now and what its core theology says is true forever.
Okay, so here's the deal in a nutshell. The mainstream Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the LDS Church, will absolutely discipline, even excommunicate any member who practices plural marriage today. It's a hard no. And yet, the idea is completely baked into its history, its scriptures, and its entire concept of the afterlife.
So how did we get here? How did the church go from openly practicing polygamy to banning it? Let's walk through how the official policy came to be, and you'll see how the ban didn't exactly erase the doctrine.
And wow, when you look at this timeline, things changed fast. In 1886, you have the prophet receiving a revelation that says polygamy is a permanent divine law. Then, just 4 years later, with huge government pressure as Utah is trying to become a state, the church issues the 1890 Manifesto. It advises against it. But the real hammer drops in 1904 with the Second Manifesto, making it an offense that will get you kicked out of the church.
And that policy stands today. The church's position is crystal clear. You practice plural marriage, you face serious consequences. It is a firm line in the sand for life here on earth. But, and this is a huge but, what about for eternity?
To get that, you have to understand this core concept called eternal sealing. This is a special ceremony or ordinance that happens in Mormon temples. It joins a husband and wife not just for this life, but forever. The promise isn't till death do us part, it's for all time.
And this is where it gets really interesting. On the one hand, plural marriage on earth, one man, multiple living wives, is completely banned, no question. But on the other hand, plural sealings for eternity are still allowed. So for instance, if a man's wife dies, he can remarry and be sealed to his new wife in the temple. In the eyes of the church, he is now eternally sealed to both women. And that distinction right there is everything.
So, okay, you have this incredibly controversial history. How does the church and its members make sense of it all today? Well, that's where you get into the world of apologetics.
You have these groups like FAIR, which isn't officially part of the church but is very well known, that exists to provide faithful answers. They use scholarship and historical research to help members work through the tough parts of their history, like polygamy, and maintain their faith.
And you often see a couple of key arguments pop up. The first is a warning against presentism, basically saying, hey, you can't judge people from the 1800s by our moral standards of today. The second is about reframing the context, trying to get you to see the world through their eyes and understand the deep spiritual reasons they believed they were commanded to do this.
But here's the thing, not everyone went along with the ban, not by a long shot. And this split created the groups we now know as Mormon fundamentalists, the ones who kept the practice alive.
Remember this date from the timeline? 1886. For the fundamentalist movement, this is ground zero. This single year, this single moment is the bedrock of their entire belief system.
For them, that 1886 revelation to Prophet John Taylor is everything. It said plural marriage was an everlasting covenant that could never be taken away. So in their view, the manifestos of 1890 and 1904 weren't new revelations from God. They were just the church caving to political pressure from the U.S. government.
I make no mistake, this is not just some abstract historical debate. There are very real communities practicing polygamy right now. You have well-known groups like the FLDS and communities like the one at Rockland Ranch. You even have families like the Dargers, who've been on TV openly advocating for their lifestyle to be decriminalized. So, we've looked at the policy, the history, the doctrine, but what about the human impact of all this? What does it feel like to live with this kind of doctrinal gray area? Well, for many, it leads to a lot of anxiety about what comes next.
And this quote just hits it right on the head. For many women in the mainstream church today, the idea that their husband, who was completely monogamous in this life, could be sealed to other women in the next, well,
It can cause real pain, confusion, and fear about what eternity actually looks like for them.
So let's just pull this all together for a second. You've got the mainstream LDS Church, which is strictly monogamous, all based on those two manifestos. You've got the apologists, defending the tough history. Then you have the fundamentalists, who are still actively practicing polygamy, holding tight to that 1886 revelation. And in the middle of it all, you have millions of individual members just trying to figure out what it all means for them.
And that really brings us to the final question, doesn't it? What we're looking at here is a massive collision between official rules, messy history, and deeply personal faith. So when all those things are pushing and pulling against each other, what is it that actually defines what a person truly believes?
This ministry has been started and directed by God. Please take your part to support this ministry. Subscribe to this channel, press like, post a comment. Your help will be very much appreciated not only by me, but also by God, who will bless you. Thank you. Get the books provided by this ministry and also the course How to Get to the Highest Heaven. Yes, you read the course, believe it and get to the highest heaven. Please look in the description of this video.